too many guns on the streets
Right.
of Philadelphia.
Exactly.
And it's not just that they have guns, it's the kind of guns. You talked earlier about how people are spraying corners and there are bullets flying everywhere. That's because of the kind of weaponry that is available to common citizens. Whether it's an automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon that's been transformed
Right.
into an automatic weapon with a switch and with an extended clip. That's a really dangerous scenario. God forbid that anybody wants to kill another individual, but God forbid that when they want to kill that other individual and they aim at them, they're using an automatic weapon. You pull the trigger one time and bullets fly everywhere. And that's why we have so many people who are injured during a single shooting incident because of the nature of the weapons. We have to get those guns off the street.
Welcome to another edition of Key Community Leaders on the Progressive Access Zone podcast, sponsored by the Hispanic Community Counseling Service. I'm your guest host, Atlas X, and today my guest is George Mosee, who's the Executive Director of PAN. George, it's really great having you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much.
George, when I first met you, I didn't realize the background you had before even becoming the director of PAN. Why don't you tell us what your background is when it comes to the city of Philadelphia?
Well, I was an attorney for the city of Philadelphia for 30 years. 28 of those years were spent at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, where I last served as the first assistant.
And what does that entail as far as your job title, George?
Well, I ran the office. I was second in command to the elected DA. I was responsible for the 600 people who worked there. Interestingly enough, I actually spent a good part of my career working on programs that were designed to prevent crime. And so it was a pretty easy segue to begin the work that I'm doing now.
And how did you get this opportunity to work at PAN? And what does PAN stand for, George?
Well, the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network has been around for 35 years. It was started by James Mills. For 13 of the years that I just talked about, I was actually on PAN's board. The interesting thing is that my retirement actually coincided with the retirement of the person who was the executive director at PAN. And so in December of 2016, when I retired, he retired. That was Mr. Robert Brown.
And I think you have a picture of him at your office, correct?
Well, that's Darrell Coates.
Oh, okay,
He's another executive director from PAN's illustrious history. In any event, in January of 2017, I was fortunate enough to be chosen for this position.
Wow, perfect timing. That's number one.
No coincidence.
Right. George, tell me, when it comes to PAN, because obviously you're considered one of our key community hub partners, I know you have different departments in PAN. How many people are underneath you at PAN? And can you tell me the different departments that you currently have at PAN?
Yeah, so we have positions for 80 employees. I have several programs. The primary program at this point in our history is the Community Crisis Intervention Program. We have advocates, we call them credible messengers, who are deployed into the communities that are hit hardest by violence every single day, 7 days a week. They work 2 shifts. One shift is Monday through Friday, and it's basically from noon to 8 in the evening. The other shift is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. On Thursday and Friday, they're on the street from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning. On Saturdays and Sundays, from 3 in the afternoon to 1 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock at night. And on Monday, again, they're there from 6 to 2 in the evening. They're called credible messengers because they, in fact, have credibility in the communities that they serve. That credibility flows from the fact that they've lived lives that are consistent with the lives of the people that we're trying to reach.
And that's a key point. Well, let's point that out right now. I'm glad you brought that up, George. So when you talk about these credible messengers, some of these, and I'm not sure what percent, perhaps you could tell me, actually were incarcerated themselves in some cases.
Many were, but that's not the only requirement for credibility in the community. Sometimes it's because they were already doing the work. Young men and women who really had a desire to give back to their communities. Likewise, the returning citizens that we employ. Those are young men and women who have a desire to in fact, right the wrongs that they may have inflicted upon the communities that they now serve.
Now, I work with two of your employees from PAN on a regular, actually four, but we'll first talk about Ike. All right, he's one of the key guys there, and Ike has been part of our Live and Love Gun Violence Prevention Tour. Ike was also with us at Powerhouse, and we also have P, who Akinche, who's now Foster to be exact, who's now going to be doing some work with us, and he's also been part of the Live and Love Gun Violence Prevention Tour. So, George, what type of screening process, even though one is credibility that they can bring to the table, but when it comes to if someone out there is listening and might be interested in working at PAN and maybe being a credible messenger, what is the process for applying for that?
Well, they need to get us a resume. They need to have a driver's license because, as I said, we deploy people into the community. Our motto is we make house calls. So you're not going to be able to do the job unless you can drive a vehicle. So you have to have a license. Other than that, we want people who can actually demonstrate that they're ready and willing to do the job. And what it really boils down to is having the confidence, the courage to speak to people that nobody else wants to talk to. You know, the group on the corner that everybody may be afraid of. Well, we go out and we strike up a conversation with them. We get to know them. If our credible messengers don't already know those people, it's their job to develop relationships with them. Because what we really want to do, what's optimum for us, is to get in front of the violence, to prevent the violence, not to respond to it after it happens, although we do that as well. And when I'm talking about prevention, let me mention the other two programs that we have. Our Intensive Prevention Services program actually works with young people who may have had a brush with the law, or who may be someone who everybody in the neighborhood or their teachers or even their parents recognize to be headed down the wrong path. And so what we do is we bring them into our safe space. We give them wholesome activities. We take them on trips. It might surprise some to know that there are young people who live 5 blocks from Boathouse Row, but they've never seen it. And just to get them out of the community, to see something like Boathouse Row or Independence Mall, it's life-changing. It opens their eyes. And not only does it open their eyes to what else is out there, it opens their eyes to other opportunities. We bring in consultants to give them financial literacy. We bring in people to talk about how to de-escalate your own emotional content so that you're not involved in that fight that might lead ultimately to gunplay.
Now, George, with regards to the violence, here we are in 2024, and we all know the last 2 to 3 years in the city of Philadelphia and across the United States, the wave of gun violence has been out of control. Carjackings, all right, drug trafficking, all types of things have been happening, you know, and just careless, reckless shooting. It's one thing if you're targeting an individual, but it's, at the same time, we've had just widespread gunfire, you know, where just innocent people are being killed. How has your office been addressing this? Because obviously this is an unprecedented time compared to other times. So have you done anything different from a strategic standpoint to handle this? And what is your opinion on maybe what is the catalyst for that's brought on this out of control wave of gun violence that's happening while you're at PAN?
Well, let me start with the catalyst. And catalyst might not be the precise word that describes what it is that's really important here, but I think it's the climate. I think it's the environment, especially with regard to what it is that we need to instill the right moral values, to socialize young people in particular properly, and to support people of all ages, because unfortunately this problem isn't relegated to juveniles. In fact, the 25 to 35 year category includes more victims of violence than any other. And so what we believe has to happen is that we have to reopen all of the institutions that are responsible for impacting someone from a sociological and psychological perspective. And one of the reasons that we partner with you and that we cherish our partnership with you is because of the prevalence of trauma as one of the catalysts for what it is that we're experiencing. You know, trauma can be debilitating, but trauma can also, and the adage is, hurt people hurt people. So we need to address that, and that's part of our primary strategy. When we deploy the credible messengers into the community, they don't go out with just a good speech, with sharing their experiences. That's important because it opens the door to the relationship. But at the end of the day, we have to have services, tangible opportunities for people to address their needs. I didn't mention our human services department, where we have coordinators, where we have people who will actually link the people that we're talking about who have these needs with the services, with the treatment, with whatever it is that they need to address whatever it is that they're experiencing. We fed a lot of people. It's very difficult to be a productive citizen if your belly's not full. It's very difficult to be a productive citizen if you don't have health care. It's extremely difficult to be a productive citizen if you don't have a roof over your head. And so our Human Services Department has resources. I tell people all the time, the most important word in our very long name, the Philadelphia Anti-Drug and Anti-Violence Network, is the word network. And that's what we've built.
Now, George, with that being said, and you talked about environment, all right? So when we think about our demographic anywhere between the age of 15 to 25, and you also can go all the way up to 35, all right? How much of these do you think is from just an educational standpoint versus the influences? When we all think about the liquor companies and the tobacco companies and how they market to a certain target demographic, they're using a lot of visual things. And then we can't forget about what the radio is playing. Even though I'm a fan of rock music, hip hop music, some of this music is being detrimental to, I believe, our younger individuals who are influenced by this, okay? So what are your thoughts on these external influences and how much do you think that impacts what's happening here on the streets, George?
There's a kind of subculture that has its own language, and it has its own values. You of course, know about the issues with rap music, the messaging, the problems with aggrandizing violence, abusing women. All those things have an impact on some young people. And one of the things that I always try to do when I'm having these conversations, and as bad as the violence is, and as much as we need to devote our attention to stopping the violence, the vast majority of young people, and people for that matter in the city of Philadelphia, want peace, they want to do the right thing, and they're really going in the right direction. So we're not painting everybody with the same brush, but there are some who take what they hear in the rap music to heart, and they actually manifest it in their lives. I can tell you there have been homicides where people were shot, and it was really different rap groups competing with one another. And rather than having a contest to see who the best rapper is, they pull out guns and start shooting. Having mentioned the word gun, we have to talk about that. Too many guns on the streets of Philadelphia.
Exactly.
And it's not just that they have guns, it's the kind of guns. You talked earlier about how people are spraying corners and there are bullets flying everywhere. That's because of the kind of weaponry that is available to common citizens. Whether it's an automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon that's been transformed into an automatic weapon with a switch and with an extended clip. That's a really dangerous scenario. God forbid that anybody wants to kill another individual, but God forbid that when they want to kill that other individual and they aim at them, they're using an automatic weapon. You pull the trigger one time and bullets fly everywhere. And that's why we have so many people who are injured during a single shooting incident because of the nature of the weapons. We have to get those guns off the street.
Now, George, that's very important. So let me ask you this. Where do the parents come to this when it comes to this issue that's going on? Meaning it's almost like, say, the bartender, right? At some point, the bartender has to know when to cut off the drink to a person. If they see that they're visibly intoxicated, it is that bartender's responsibility to say no more, okay? Because you don't want that restaurant to be held liable. So with that being said, George, when you're out there dealing with these situations, what is your thought on the parent or parents and their responsibility? And do you see some type of training needed for them, or are they slacking in their responsibility to govern some of their kids? Because it's not like all these kids are living on their own, okay, have their own place and are just running around doing whatever they want to do. What is your thought on the parents' responsibility to what's happening right now with the out of control gun violence here in the city?
Well, again, we're talking about a small percentage of the population when we identify parents who are having a difficult time fulfilling their obligations as parents. You know, the vast majority of parents are behind their children 100%, but many parents are victims of everything that we've talked about. You know, we've got babies raising babies. We've got parents who, as a result of their parents being incarcerated or having been victims of the cocaine epidemic, or now the epidemic of heroin and synthetic drugs. As somebody who's stationed in East Division in Kensington, you know just how rampant
Definitely.
the opioid epidemic continues to be. It's taken parents out of the picture. And so one of the things that we do is we actually have parenting classes.
Okay.
And the parents can come, and I should say the grandparents also can come into a safe space. They can talk about their experiences, and we have a curriculum where we actually instruct them. I mean, it's something that I wish I had when I was, a young parent. That somebody would actually give me a formal education on, what it is, what the best practices are for being an effective parent, especially in times like this.
George, one other question on this area right here. When your credible messengers or other people are out on the street representing PAN, what percent of this population that's maybe involved in this would you say, if you have a insight on this, is maybe homeless as far as when it comes to some of the kids and young adults that are maybe engaged in some of this activity? Do you have any numbers on that, George?
No numbers, but I can tell you it's a prevalent problem. And what really shocked me, after having been in the DA's office all those years, when I finally started to work closely with the population that we're talking about, how many young people are actually homeless. And don't think of homelessness as being, the person sleeping on the vent, or, the person who lives at the bus stop or down in the concourse. Homelessness is also going from bed to bed every night, spending the night with whatever friend will take you in, or, whatever person will take a few dollars from you to let you come into their home. And so many young people, I mean, really young people, 13, 14, 15, who are in those circumstances, who really don't have a consistent place to call their home.
Wow, that's really something, George. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and you alluded to it, you are one of our key community hub partners. We came together on Powerhouse, where we had a booth down at the event. And for once again, those of you that don't know what Powerhouse is, that's something sponsored by Power 99 iHeartRadio. It takes place in October every year. It's at the Wells Fargo Center, and it's a big event involving hip hop, and there were probably about 18,000 people there. So we felt it was a great idea to have a booth there and to run a promo there so that we could target the target demographic, because the majority of the people there were between anywhere from 14 to maybe 25 years of age. So that's one of the ways we've partnered. I've also had a chance to meet Brandon at your organization, Sakina, and Monica, all right? Tell me a little bit about their positions, because they're now giving us some referrals for the Panic Room.
Right, that's that Human Services Department that I was talking about. And so the credible messengers make the contact, develop the relationship, and they do a kind of triage to determine what families need. Whether it's a family where there was an instant victim, someone was shot, was stabbed, or a family that had a kind of tangential relationship to a victim. Certainly, trauma reverberates through a community. And while the credible messengers are out canvassing, they may run into people who aren't related to the family that brought them to the area, but who nevertheless need the services of professionals. And that's where Sakina and Monica and Brandon come in. They actually link those families vis-a-vis a referral from the credible messengers to the services that they need. The trauma-informed care, housing if that's what they need. And that's a difficult proposition. I wish we were more effective at satisfying people's housing needs, but it's a real mountain to climb. But we can also help people with job training
Okay.
and employment, educational advancement. I went out and visited Orleans Tech not too long ago. They have a fantastic program, and we'll be referring young people there to get training so that they can have, much more than just a job, but a job that will give them a living wage and allow them to support a family.
Now, that's a key word right there, a living wage. Right now in California, they've raised the minimum wage actually to $20. So on one hand, it's great. You say, wow, the minimum wage, $20. But then right after that, they said that some of their employers may have to lay off people. All right, so because they can't afford this new minimum wage. Now, we know it's not that high here in the city of Philadelphia or in the surrounding Delaware Valley, but just the fact that you need a living wage to have a chance to, be able to have your own place, get back and forth with transportation, and a chance to maybe move forward in your life. Now, once again, when it comes to Sakina and Monica, the way we have partnered, because you mentioned the word trauma, is our Panic Room, which is every Monday night from 6 to 7:30, and that is an online virtual safe place where people who are dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, need or mentorship. These are things that we can help out with, and this has really been working out well. We've gotten some resources, some referrals, from you guys already. So it's great that we're able to partner in this way, George.
I'm very thankful for the partnership.
Now, George, here we are, 2024. We have a new mayor, the first female mayor, and the 100th mayor of the city. It's almost like, to me, when Obama took over as president, the city, the country, was in a recession, all right, and things were looking pretty desperate at that particular time. The mayor inherits this out-of-control gun violence situation, along with other issues that are common for any city. What are your thoughts on what the new mayor has to do with regards to trying to address one of the key things being the crime in the city, along with other issues that you're aware of?
Her motto has been One Philadelphia, and I think that is exactly what we need. We need for all of the entities that can bring pressure to bear to help alleviate the violence to work together. We need to all get out of our respective silos, come together as a unified coalition, different missions, different purposes, but working toward the same goal. And she's made a concerted effort to do that. We have a public safety chair, Adam Gear, who will be empowered to bring the relevant entities together at the same table with the same mindset. And I think that's very, very important. But, I would also like to address what we need to do to support this administration. And the one word that I would emphasize is the word patience. We can't expect that she's going to be able to come in and address a situation that, had its genesis in the pandemic, which, we're steadily digging our way out of, but we still haven't reached the top yet. We need to have patience with her. We need to give her an opportunity to actually manifest her vision, to bring those people together, to work through long-standing issues that have often caused the divisions that we see. We need to give her the opportunity to get those programs and people in place before we start casting dispersions, making judgments, and giving up on what I think is a really promising proposition.
All right, George, with that being said, this is the last question, all right? Because as you referenced a couple times in our interview, there's only a small percent of individuals that are causing these issues here in the city of Philadelphia. How many zip codes, there's certain hot spots, okay, around the city that are where a majority of this crime is taking place, all right? What zip codes are there? A few right offhand, or how many zip codes would you say where the majority of this is taking place?
Well, I don't usually talk in terms of zip codes. And, one of the reasons that I don't talk about zip codes is because it's misleading. You take a zip code like 19126, that includes some affluent areas as well as some areas that are experiencing the violence. What we talk about are actually corners.
Okay.
And the city has helped to identify at least 100 corners in the city of Philadelphia where there have been multiple shootings. And that's a point of emphasis, not just in terms of, where we ought to deploy the police, but where we ought to invest with resources and, things that people need to help get past the problems that have caused them to be in desperate situations.
Got it. Well, George, no one better than you to come on to the, key community leaders to give your opinion on what's happening in the city of Philadelphia. I appreciate you being a guest today, and I look forward to our continued partnership because that's what you talked about, George, networking. And we've been able to come together, we've been able to work and do certain things, and I know we're going to continue to make an impact here in the city. So thanks a lot, George, for everything you're doing as the executive director of PAN.
And thanks for everything you're doing. We really appreciate you, Atlas.
All right, and that's another edition of Key Community Leaders on the Progressive Access Zone podcast, sponsored by the Hispanic Community Counseling Service.